Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, I want to go over one very simple trick that you can use to eliminate wrist pain in the push-up. Now, I'm also going to talk about a very similar concept in something like a bench press or a machine press, and why you might be experiencing something similar in that setting, and then also how you can go about troubleshooting that. So this historically has worked for me like a charm, and many of my clients like a charm. That doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but it's definitely worth trying, in my opinion. So just to get right into it, what I often think is the root of this problem is this particular position right here, right? Because oftentimes when people go down to do push-ups, their arms are not positioned in such a way where it's like the wrist is bending more as they come down. What happens is, the elbow tracks backward or outward, and as a consequence of that, this angle moves. I'll just draw this, from this first angle, which was here. Hopefully you can see this. I'll zoom in on it, right? This is the first angle, which is, let's say, close to 90 degrees or more. And then the angle gets bigger as the elbows travel backward. And oftentimes it's not so coincidental, I think, that people end up getting the wrist pain mostly in the top position where their wrist is basically just being cranked backward. And so I think that is oftentimes the root of the issue, is the wrist is just simply getting cranked backward too far. So what are two very simple things that we can do to troubleshoot this? Well, if I erased all of this is going to be cool, okay, I promise. If I erased all of this and just left the arm, or what we think is an arm, and then I made a U-turn, and all of a sudden, oh, we're doing a squat now, where the hips go back, the knees go forward. What happens as we go into a squat? Well, this shin now travels forward, and this angle gets smaller. So what do people do on a squat to help them with that? They do something called heel elevation, where they start their foot, in this particular case, at a more open angle, right? Why does heel elevation work? There are a number of different reasons. One of the main ones being that it opens the front of your ankle such that you can just travel through a greater range of motion. So why not just do the exact same thing in a push-up, right? So instead of starting your hand in such a position where it's being just cranked backward like we talked about earlier, right? So here's someone's torso, here's their head, right? Instead of starting at this angle, simply just put something underneath of the palm so that your hand starts at a more open angle, right? This could be a plate. This could be a book if you're at home and you're doing home workouts. This could literally be anything. You just put it directly underneath of the palm, stack it over the wrist. Now, what else you could do is, again, just riding along with this theme of just altering the structural constraints of the scenario, is instead of having to elevate your palm, you could simply just grab a pair of light dumbbells and grab the dumbbells and do push-ups using the dumbbells, right? So all we're doing is we're simply just changing the constraints that we've began with, much like you could do in any other exercise, right? What do you do if you have shoulder pain at a bench? Well, you play around with the angle of pressing, right? And in the same sense, or in a similar sense, we're playing around with the angle of loading from the hand upward. So two major things: elevate the palm, in essence. And then number two, you could try using dumbbells as well. Those are two great options. Now, what do we do though in a scenario where, let's say, we're using a Smith machine or a chest press machine or a barbell bench press and our wrists are bothering us? Well, in a vast majority of cases, I'm going to do something a little bit funky here to demonstrate. If we imagine this is a line of resistance, okay? And you imagine that I'm doing a bench press, right? So picture me like this. That's the line of force of the bench press. Oftentimes when people are experiencing these wrist issues, hopefully the perspective is correct here, you see that I'm covering the line, right? And that's because the line is, basically going straight through my forearm, but more importantly, straight through my wrist. Oftentimes what happens, if I go to this other side now, is, do you see how you can now see this line, and specifically how there is a distance between the line and my wrist? What does that mean? Well, it means that the bar, or whatever implement I'm using, is cranking my wrist backward like this the entire time. So what do I need to do? I need to simply find a way to cover up that line and make sure that the resistance is going straight through the wrist. So just to maybe paint a more clear picture, a lot of people end up benching like this. If my marker is the bar to where the line of force is behind the wrist, you simply just need to sneak it down over top of your palm. And now all of a sudden, even though your wrist is in the same position, the force is totally distinct. Why? Because the force is going boom right through the wrist joint. So in either case, whether we're talking about a barbell press, a machine press, a push-up, what we're ultimately talking about is changing the constraints and as a consequence, changing the force. Or in the case of a barbell press, we're simply changing the constraints via moving the bar in a different place in our hand. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more about exercise and biomechanics, join my free community. The link is in the description. In there, we have tons and tons of people interacting every day, over 2,000 people now. So join the free community and hop in on the fun and the learning.